Hi YouTube! It's been a while since I made any butterfly dice, so today I figured I could do a video making some dice with paper Monarch butterflies and real dried flowers. That means that we're starting with a company called Moth and Myth. I will link to them and everything else that I use down in the description below. But Moth and Myth are where I get these really exceptional, printed on both sides, paper specimens. They primarily have moths and butterflies, but they do have some other specimens. Once a year they put out bees. They also have the snake that I posted in a short recently, so amazing company, really great products, and their micro specimens are excellent for dice. They also just announced that they're making an even smaller version than their micros, and those are going to be really incredible. So great company. I unfortunately cannot show you the Monarch butterfly sheet because when I purchased a bunch of Monarch butterfly sheets, I was mature and responsible and popped all of the specimens out ahead of time and then organized them all. But these are the sheets that I use, and I had just removed the Monarch butterflies from that sheet at the start of the video, which we'll get to now. And to give you just a little peek at the outcome, here's a quick look at the D4 from the set made in this video. I think they came out fantastic. So let's make some dice. After popping the butterflies out of the sheet, I'm unstacking them since I put them into a little container together, and just setting every butterfly next to the die I think it would look best in. I did decide to use one of the lighter colored Monarchs for a variant D20, and then just went with the smaller, darker colored ones for the rest of the dice. Then I'm going to fold all of the butterflies and position them in the mold. To fold them, I just grab onto the little abdomen or middle section with a pair of tweezers and pinch down both of the wings along the side. And in terms of positioning, I always want these positioned with the wings facing inward so that it looks like it's landing on something. You can, of course, push these against the mold. There is definitely a style or many styles that could be done with that kind of positioning, but for me, I really like the butterflies to look like they are landing on the flowers. So I want those wings to be up and nothing to be underneath them. I don't want it to be pushed against the mold in any way, which does mean a bit more finagling to make sure everything fits nicely within the molds. So I just go through one by one, fold every butterfly, and spend a bit of time making sure it is positioned correctly, or as correctly as I can get it within my dice molds. Once all of the butterflies are positioned, I'm going to go ahead and mix resin, and this is going to be my first of 2 pours in my blank molds. My intention here is to fill my molds about halfway, or more specifically, about to the middle point or right up to that abdomen on the butterfly. The 2 reasons that I'm doing this are, 1, because the flowers that I'm using can fall to the bottom of the molds, and if I don't have this resin layer, when it then rises up with the resin, it'll get caught under the butterfly and block off a bunch of it, which I don't want. And 2, oftentimes bubbles can get trapped on these little paper specimens, and I have always found that doing this first halfway fill pretty much negates all bubbles for me. A big caveat is, of course, I'm filming, so the filming gods decided to humble me, and I did end up with a few more bubbles than usual in this set. I do think that this is because I was rushing a bit when I was pouring, and I didn't degas my resin as much as I normally do, but here you can see I saw some of those bubbles in my D6 specifically, and decided to try to cut them out and see if I couldn't address them or negate them in the second resin pour. To do this, I'm just going ahead and pulling this partial blank out of my mold, and then taking an X-Acto knife and just carving out that little air bubble, basically trying to open it up and make the entrance, if you will, to the bubbles a little bit wider, in the hopes that when I go in to pour the resin over the flowers that I'll be adding, it will then also fill the cavities that I'm making instead of just giving me these bubbles. And this was partially successful. A few of the bubbles filled, but a few of them reformed. Still, I'm happy that I decided to take this step because I do think it helped a bit. When I was done trying to carve out those little bubbles, I just popped the blank right back into my blank mold and then moved on to adding the dried flowers so that I could do my second resin pour. In terms of flowers, I've always found Etsy to be the best source for random, small, dried flowers. This first type that I'm using, I'm pretty sure are called German stattice flowers, and I think they're really, really beautiful, especially this white and red version. Absolutely gorgeous, and I love how they hold up in dice. So I'm just picking out some from my jar, breaking them off of the stems, and setting them to the side, as long as the flowers are open enough that I think they'll look nice in a set, and also the little cluster is small enough that I think it will fit into each die. The second type of flower I'm using are called ozothamnus flowers, and you can find these dyed in a lot of different colors. Some of the dyes hold up in resin, some don't, but I really like this natural pink and white. It's probably my favorite combination, so I grabbed a nice little bunch of those. Then I got into the work of breaking the different flower bunches or clusters off of their stems. I like there to be as little stems as possible in the dice, so I try to break off the flowers or the different clusters as close as I can without them themselves collapsing. And same thing with the ozothamnus flowers here. These are more prone to falling apart. They are very, very fragile, but I just try to get little clusters of like 3 or 4 if I can, and just break them off of the main stem. Try to get as little excess stem as possible, and then set them to the side so they're ready to be worked with. Once I have my florals all prepped, I then begin placing them in the mold. You have a couple of options here. I like my flowers to face up or opposite of the butterfly, so there's something very interesting on both sides of the die. One side you get the butterfly, one side you get the open blooming flowers. You can, if you want it to be more realistic, place the flowers down so it really is like the butterflies are landing exactly on them. All up to you and your own personal preference. This is just how I like to do it. So I go about my molds trying to wiggle the flowers in their place. And then for this design, I decided to kind of surround the German stattice flowers with the little smaller ozothamnus flowers. Not too worried if some of the buds break off because we did that first layer of resin already, so they're not going to interfere with the butterflies even if they fall down. Once I'm finished, my molds were looking pretty full, pretty nice, and it was time to take them to the casting table and do another pour. Just mixed up my resin like usual, spent a little longer this time degassing it like I should have the first time. And then with flowers, you're always going to deal with a lot of air bubbles, so you just want to go in a really slow, thin stream while you're pouring. Take your time, move on, and then be prepared to come back several times to the same mold as the resin slowly works its way down and air bubbles slowly work their way up. It is definitely a type of pour that requires some patience, some thinner resin, and a lot of degassing along the way to work out as many of those air bubbles as possible. And when I have a little break from pouring in the molds, I take my time to pour a little bit of resin onto the lid of my blank mold and also degas that a little bit along the way. I just try to every once in a while give my molds a little wiggle with my fingers and hit them with my heat gun, just trying to encourage those air bubbles to come up so that I can pop them. Then when I've finally given up on degassing, I just go ahead and pop my lid over the top, hoping that I won't come back to some giant voids in the blanks. I also give just a couple of squeezes and pats to the top to try to make sure it is positioned correctly and I won't end up with any huge lifted faces either. Then it's into the pressure pot for 24 hours. And the next day, I was absolutely delighted to see that there were no voids or bubbles or anything at the face of these blanks, which was fantastic. So I just went and cracked off or pulled off all of the excess flashing and then popped each of the blanks out of the mold, took a little look at them, was pretty happy with how they looked. Had to make a decision whether to frame these to make them a terrarium-style set, which I think could have been very beautiful, or just to leave them plain as they are and cast them as just the monarch butterflies and the flowers. Ultimately, I decided just to leave them plain, so went back to my dice molds and it is time to cast our blanks. I already had my mixed and degassed resin, so as always, I fill my molds about half to 3/4 to 2/3, something around there of the way with this clear resin. And then taking my blanks, I wanted the monarch butterfly to be the high face of every die, so I just positioned it that way. Immediately, the D12 rolled under my finger and didn't want to be positioned that way, so I just popped it back out. Popped it back in, felt it go into place as it should have been, and carried on, making sure to put every die in the mold so that the monarch butterfly is facing wherever my high face was for that mold. And for the last time in this video, I degassed my resin a little bit, heating it with the heat gun, and once that is all finished, it is just a matter of popping the lids onto my molds, putting my molds into the pressure pot, and then seeing how the dice turned out the next day. Eventually the next day came around, so I could go ahead and take all of the lids off. Happy to see that there were, again, no bubbles or voids or anything weird going on with these faces of the dice. That was a big relief. Then it was just a matter of demolding them and showing you all some close-ups of the results. Overall, I think the set is just stunning. It's pretty hard to go wrong with really beautiful paper monarch butterflies and really beautiful dried flowers. There are just a couple more tiny air bubbles than I usually get and typically would like in the set. A few among the wings of this D6. There are a couple of little ones caught in the D12 that you'll see in a moment, but really they're not that significant. Just probably my biggest annoyance or kind of drat aspect of the set, Can't have things go perfect when I'm filming. Regardless, I love them and I'm sure they will find a wonderful home once I get them sanded and polished up to their full potential. So with that is everything I have for you in this video. As always, if you liked the video, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to my channel if you would like to see more videos. I love hearing your opinions down in the comments, and I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye!